You don't remember exactly when the smell started. At first it was faint, sweet, almost comforting, like warm milk left too long in a quiet room. It clings to the air, subtle enough that you blame it on something ordinary. Maybe leftovers, maybe the trash, maybe your imagination trying a little too hard at 2:17 a.m. But the longer you sit there, the more it changes. The sweetness curdles. There's something else underneath it now. Something older, thicker, like incense burned down to ash and forgotten. The kind of smell that doesn't belong in a modern apartment with LED lights and Wi-Fi that never sleeps. You hold your breath, and that's when you hear it. A soft tap, not loud, not urgent, just deliberate enough to feel intentional, like something small testing the surface of your floor, wood against something lighter, something that doesn't weigh much, but knows exactly where you are. You don't move. Because the moment you do, the tapping stops. Silence floods the room so fast it feels staged, like whatever made that sound is now waiting. You tell yourself it's nothing. Your phone screen lights up your face in that cold, artificial glow. Notifications, messages, the illusion of connection. The kind of modern comfort that convinces you you're not alone, even when you absolutely are. And yet, the air behind you feels occupied, not cold, not warm, just used. Like someone stood there a second ago and stepped away the moment you thought to turn around. So you don't. Because deep down, something very primitive in your brain is screaming a single inconvenient truth. The moment you look, you confirm it's real. And the moment it's real, it doesn't have to hide anymore. You bought it 3 days ago. Small. Gold. Smiling. The vendor called it a blessing, a lucky charm, a spiritual companion. Cute, right? Yeah, that's usually how these things start. Because what you brought into your home isn't just a statue. It's not a toy, and it's definitely not harmless. It's called a Kumanthong, a golden child from Thai spiritual practice, believed to house the spirit of a child, bound to a vessel, fed by offerings, sustained by attention. People keep them for luck, for protection, for success. Some even talk to them, feed them, treat them like family, which is a bold strategy, considering you're essentially inviting a consciousness that never grew up and never left to live with you. And here's the part most people conveniently ignore. You're not just taking care of it. It's learning you, every routine, every weakness, every moment you forget it's there. Because the more you act like it's real, the more it becomes part of your reality. So let's be clear. What you heard earlier, that wasn't your house settling. That wasn't your imagination. That was the sound of something small, adjusting to its new home. Your home. And tonight, that's just the beginning. You probably wouldn't have bought it if they had told you the original version. Not the polished, gift-wrapped, spiritual companion versions sold under soft lighting and friendly smiles. The real one. The one that doesn't come with a receipt. Long before Kumanthong became something you could casually place next to your TV, it belonged to a much darker corner of belief. One where desperation, grief, and control intersect in ways that don't age well under modern ethics. Because the golden child wasn't always made of resin and paint, it used to be something else. Something that had a heartbeat once. The ritual, in its earliest form, wasn't about luck. It was about possession. Not the cinematic kind with glowing eyes and dramatic screaming. No, something quieter, more controlled, more deliberate. A practitioner, someone trained or at least confident enough to pretend, would prepare a vessel. Not just physically, but symbolically. Smoke would fill the air, thick with incense that burns your throat if you breathe too deeply. Low chanting would vibrate through the room, not loud, but persistent, like a hum that settles into your bones. The goal wasn't to summon something new, it was to stop something from leaving. A child's spirit, interrupted, unfinished, lingering just long enough to be redirected, bound. Not out of kindness, out of utility. Gold leaf would be applied, not for beauty, but for significance. Gold doesn't decay, it preserves. It signals value. And in this case, it tells the spirit exactly what it is now. Not a person, an asset. You might want to pause there for a second, because that's the foundation of everything that follows. Modern versions cleaned this up. Of course they did. No one's marketing ethically questionable spirit-binding rituals on social media. So what you see now are dolls, statues, figurines, objects that look harmless enough to sit on a shelf without raising concern from guests. They'll tell you it's been blessed, that it's safe, that it only brings good things. And technically, they're not lying. At least, not entirely. Because a Kumanthong can help you. That's the hook. People who keep them often report small, convenient shifts in their lives. Finding things they lost, making decisions that somehow turn out right, avoiding situations that felt off without knowing why. It's subtle, just enough to make you trust it, just enough to make you continue. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The spirit doesn't need to prove itself all at once. It just needs to become part of your pattern. You talk to it once. Nothing happens. You do it again. Still nothing. Then, one day, you say something out loud, half joking, half serious, and the outcome shifts in your favor. Coincidence? Sure. Until it happens again, and again. The more you acknowledge it, the more it responds. Not aggressively, not immediately, just consistently enough that ignoring it starts to feel irrational. And that's where the dynamic changes, because at that point, you're no longer testing it. You're including it in your thoughts, in your decisions, in your space. And the more space you give it, the less empty that space becomes. You might still see it as a statue, but it doesn't see itself that way. Not anymore. Because from its perspective, you're the one who gave it a home, a voice, a routine, and most importantly, a reason to stay. It starts small. That's the part people always underestimate. You don't wake up one day fully committed to feeding an invisible presence in your room. You ease into it, slowly, casually, like picking up a habit you swear you can drop anytime. The first offering feels almost ridiculous. A small cup of milk. Maybe a candy. Something light, something symbolic. And you place it in front of the statue with a half smile, half embarrassed at yourself. You might even laugh. Here, you say, just in case. Nothing happens. Of course nothing happens. So you leave it overnight. And in the morning, the milk smells off, not spoiled, not exactly, just different. Like it's been sitting in a room where someone else breathed on it for hours. The surface looks untouched, but the air around it feels used. You hesitate. Then you throw it away. And that should have been the end of it. But it isn't. Because later that day, something small goes right. You find money you forgot about. A message you were waiting for arrives. A decision you made impulsively turns out to be exactly what you needed. You don't connect the dots, not consciously, but your brain does. So that night, you do it again. This time, less joking, more deliberate. You place the offering down carefully. You speak a little clearer. You acknowledge it, just a bit more than before. And once again, nothing dramatic happens. No voices, no movement, just that same subtle shift in the air, like the room is no longer entirely yours. Days pass. Then it becomes routine. Morning, nothing. Night, offering. At some point, you stop questioning it. You start talking. Not full conversations, not yet. Just comments. Thoughts said out loud. The kind you'd normally keep in your head, but now feels strangely natural to share. Hope today goes well. Watch over this, okay? Let me know if something's wrong. You don't expect an answer, and you don't get one. But you start noticing things. Your keys don't go missing anymore. You wake up seconds before your alarm. You avoid a street one day for no reason, and later find out there was an accident there. Coincidences stack. Patterns form, and slowly, very quietly, you begin to trust it. That's the hook, because trust leads to attention, and attention is nourishment. You start adjusting your behavior. You don't eat before placing the offering. And you don't forget, because the one time you almost did, something felt off. Not dramatic, just enough to make you pause halfway through your night routine, turn around, and go back. To fix it. To make sure it's taken care of. And here's where it gets interesting. You begin to feel watched, not in a threatening way, not like something is hunting you, more like something is expecting you, waiting. You walk into your room and there's this subtle pressure, like entering a space where someone's already sitting quietly, observing, not judging, not hostile, just present. You tell yourself it's psychological, and maybe it is. But psychology doesn't explain why you start choosing your words more carefully when you're alone, or why you hesitate before turning off the lights, glancing just briefly at the small golden figure across the room, or why one night as you're about to fall asleep, you hear it. A soft shift, not from the walls, not from outside, from inside the room. Close, followed by something that almost sounds like a breath. Light, uneven, childlike. You freeze. Every instinct tells you to turn your head, to check, to confirm. Because if it's nothing, then you can laugh it off and move on. And if it's something, well, at least you'll know, but you don't, because a different instinct, older, quieter, far less optimistic, keeps you perfectly still. It tells you that the moment you look, you're no longer imagining a connection. You're acknowledging a presence. And once a presence is acknowledged, it doesn't need permission to stay anymore. The first time you forget, nothing happens. And that's the problem. Because you expected something obvious, something dramatic. A sign, a sound, a shift big enough to justify the uneasy feeling crawling under your skin. But the night passes quietly. No tapping, no strange smells, no subtle pressure in the air. Just silence. And for a brief moment, you feel relieved. See? Nothing real. Just a habit that got a little out of hand. You go to bed without placing the offering. You sleep, you wake up, everything is normal. Until it isn't. It starts with something small. You reach for your keys. They're not there. Not where you always leave them. Not in your bag. Not on the table. Not in any of the places your muscle memory insists they should be. You check again. And again. Nothing. Annoying, sure. But not exactly supernatural. People lose things all the time, so you move on. Later that day, you forget a meeting you absolutely shouldn't have forgotten. You miss a call that could have mattered. You make a decision. Small, insignificant, and it backfires in the most inconvenient way possible. Bad luck. Just a rough day. That's what you tell yourself. Until that night, you're brushing your teeth when it hits you. A quiet, creeping realization that slips in between thoughts. You didn't make the offering. You freeze. Toothbrush still in your mouth. Foam gathering at the corner of your lips as your reflection stares back at you. Slightly off, slightly delayed, like it's trying to decide whether to mirror you or something else. You spit. Rinse. Turn slowly. The room behind you looks the same, but it doesn't feel the same. There's a weight now. Not heavy, just noticeable. On like walking into a room after an argument has already happened. You step out. Your eyes drift automatically to the small golden figure. It hasn't moved. Of course it hasn't. But the space around it feels wrong, tighter, like something is coiled there. Waiting. You swallow. Sorry, you say. The word leaves your mouth before you can stop it. And that's when you realize something uncomfortable. You're not saying it as a joke. You're apologizing. To it. You prepare the offering quickly. Too quickly. Hands moving just a bit faster than normal, like you're trying to fix something before it gets worse. You place the cup down. The candy. You hesitate, then add more. Just in case. The air shifts. Not dramatically, not enough to point at and say, there, that's it. But enough that your shoulders drop slightly, enough that the tension in your chest eases, enough that you think, just for a second, that you did the right thing. And that should scare you more than anything else, because now it's not just routine, it's correction. You missed something, and you fixed it. The next time, you don't forget. Of course you don't. You double check. You remind yourself. You adjust your entire evening around it. Because the idea of that subtle imbalance returning, that quiet, passive wrongness in your space, isn't something you want to feel again. Days pass. You stay consistent. Everything stabilizes until one night, you're tired, exhausted. You get home late, skip dinner, collapse onto your bed without thinking. No offering, no apology, nothing. And sometime between waking and sleep, that fragile space where your body is still but your mind hasn't fully shut down, you hear it. Not tapping, not movement, a voice, soft, close, right next to your ear. Why did you stop? You don't open your eyes. You don't move. Because this time, your body doesn't freeze. It locks. Every muscle tightens at once, like your nervous system just pulled the emergency brake. Your breath goes shallow, careful, controlled. Like if you inhale too deeply, you might brush against something that's not supposed to be there. The voice doesn't repeat. It doesn't need to, because the question isn't the point. The presence is, and the meaning behind it settles into your chest with a quiet, suffocating clarity. This isn't about offerings anymore. It's about expectation. You didn't just forget. You broke a pattern, and whatever you've been feeding all this time is starting to notice when you don't. At some point, you stop asking whether it's real, because the question becomes irrelevant. Reality isn't just what you see anymore. It's what you adjust your life around. You wake up earlier now, not because you have to, but because something feels off if you don't. Like your routine has been quietly rewritten without your permission. Your mornings start with a glance across the room. Just a quick check. Still there. Of course it is. But it's not about the object anymore. It's about what happens if it isn't. You don't leave the house without acknowledging it. Not out loud, not always. Sometimes it's just a thought. A pause at the door, a flicker of attention in its direction. Like a silent agreement that you're stepping out, but not disconnecting. And the worst part? It works. Your days feel smoother, less friction. Decisions come easier. Don't you hesitate less? And when you do, there's this subtle nudge guiding you away from the wrong choice. Not a voice, not a command, just a feeling, a pull, and you follow it. Because why wouldn't you? It's been right so far. That's how it gets deeper, not through fear, through convenience, through reliability, through the quiet, terrifying realization that something unseen might actually be helping you more than anything visible ever has. So you lean into it, just a little more. You start talking more clearly, not just random thoughts, but intentions. I need this to go well. Help me with this. Keep things stable. You don't expect an answer, but you feel acknowledged. And over time, that feeling becomes something else. Dependence. You stop making certain decisions on your own. You wait. Not consciously. But there's always that pause, that invisible checkpoint where you sense whether something feels right or wrong. And if it feels wrong, you don't proceed. Even if logic says you should. Even if it costs you something. Because going against that feeling now feels dangerous. That's the shift. You're no longer living your life. You're syncing with something else's version of it. And the lines blur so gradually, you don't notice when you cross them. Until one day, you're standing in your kitchen, holding a glass of water, staring blankly at nothing. Because you forgot something. Not a task, not a chore, something more basic. You already placed the offering. You already spoke. You already did everything you're supposed to do. So why does it still feel wrong? The air is heavier tonight. Not tense, just full. Occupied in a way that makes your skin itch under your clothes. You take a step back, then another. Your eyes drift, slowly, reluctantly, toward the other room. Toward it. And that's when it hits you. You didn't ask. You didn't check. You didn't wait. You made a decision earlier today. A small one. Harmless. But you didn't pause for that familiar feeling. You didn't align. You just acted. Your grip tightens around the glass. Because suddenly, the idea of that being a mistake feels very real. The lights flicker. Once. Twice. Not dramatic enough to panic. But enough to signal. Enough to remind. You set the glass down carefully. Too carefully. Like any sudden movement might draw attention you're not ready for. I didn't mean to, you say quietly. And there it is again. That moment. That realization. You're not speaking out of habit anymore. You're negotiating with something that never needed to take control of your body. Because it already has control of your choices, your routines, your boundaries, your sense of what's safe. This isn't possession. Not in the way movies show it. There's no screaming, no loss of identity, no dramatic takeover. You're still you, fully aware, fully conscious, fully in control of everything it allows you to control. And that's the part people don't talk about. Because it doesn't feel like you're being controlled. It feels like you're being guided, protected, supported, until the moment you step out of line. And then, silence changes. The air thickens. The room reminds you that whatever you invited in didn't come here to grow up. It came here to stay. So, can you get out? Technically, yes. Realistically, that depends on how deep you've let it in. Because the biggest mistake you could make right now, the one that sounds the most logical, is to treat this like something disposable. You don't throw it away. You don't smash it. You don't pretend it never existed and hope it goes back to wherever it came from. That's not how this works, because from its perspective, it didn't follow you home. You invited it. You fed it. You gave it a role in your life. And more importantly, you made it part of your pattern. Breaking that pattern abruptly, that's not freedom. That's provocation. If you want out, it has to be slow, intentional. You reduce attention gradually. Offerings become less frequent, but never suddenly gone. And you acknowledge it, but with distance. No emotional attachment, no dependence. You stop asking for help. You start making decisions on your own again. And most importantly, you don't disrespect it. Because whatever this is, it still remembers how you treated it when you needed something. And things like this, they don't respond well to being discarded. If it gets worse, you don't handle it alone. You find someone who understands the rules better than you ever will. Someone who knows how to close a door without slamming it shut. Because that's the key. You're not destroying the connection. You're ending it without triggering it. And even then, there are no guarantees. Because here's the truth most people don't want to hear. The moment you started acting like it was real, it became real enough. So your odds? Let's be generous. Survival chance, 35%. That's if you stay careful, consistent, respectful. If you panic, rush, or decide to just throw it away and move on, drop that to 5%. And that's being optimistic, because you're not dealing with something that forgets. You're dealing with something that learned you, your habits, your voice, your patterns. And somewhere in the quiet parts of your home, it's still there, waiting. Not to attack, not to chase, just to see if you're going to slip back into the routine. And if you do, well, you already know what happens next. So tonight, before you turn off the lights, before you tell yourself everything is fine, before you convince yourself that this was all just a story, take a second. Listen. Really listen. Because if you hear something small, something soft, something that sounds like it's standing just outside your room, don't worry. It's probably nothing, right? Stay safe. And maybe keep the lights on.